And Steve is going to be here. That freedom of the press isn't just newspapers. As we all know, there's an online and television component. Steve is going to talk to us a little bit about his job and how it applies to what we're learning in class, and he's going to have some real-world experiences to share with us. And Steve is actually leaving us today, and he is going to New Hampshire for the New Hampshire primaries. So obviously there's lots of stuff going on in the news. I'm just going to pop this up here. Some of the things that we're going to talk about today that Steve is going to kind of cover, and we're going to get you all involved as well in a little bit, is what is freedom of press and how is it practiced in various parts of the media? What does it mean to practice successful digital citizenship in our lives? How should we as members of the community consume media? And how can members of the panel like Steve make this topic more real and relevant? And obviously, Steve, this is some pictures that I found of you, just to kind of introduce. I'm sure you remember the right, but do you remember the left?
Wow. I guess so. My hair's a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So on the right, Steve, is you with President, was that candidate or President Bush at the time?
Right, that was Governor Bush at the time.
Governor Bush at the time.
And he ran for president, and then he became the president of the United States. And I was the first TV news reporter in the country to fly down to Austin, Texas to interview him and talk to him about running for president of the United States. And then a month after that interview, he announced that he was running for president. And then a year later, he was elected president of the United States.
Was that like 99?
99, yeah, 98, yeah, exactly.
All right, great,
yeah.
Excellent. Do you remember the Twinkie thing?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So I cover storms, and I'm out in the field, and when it started during these big snowstorms, people would come to my live location and bring me snacks to eat, and I'd put them on the air, and that was what used to happen.
Oh, so people from the neighborhoods would bring you food?
Bring me bake things, cookies, while we were out in the snowstorms, bring us food, and that sort of became my claim to fame over the past 25 years at Channel 7 when the storms happen and I'm in the field.
Oh, I thought you were doing a story on Hostess or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right, that's great. Yeah. Well, Steve, we're going to get started, and there's a number of topics that we're going to get through, everyone. And Steve and I are going to get through the topics together. I know that everyone knows we had a lawyer in here. There were some of you that talked about possibly interests in the law. I don't know if anyone here is interested in going into the media or being a reporter. But again, just like that, that's kind of a cool opportunity for it. So I'm going to have Steve kind of address the origins of him and working for the news. So Steve, if you could go back and just tell the kids, why did you choose a career in the media? How and when did it start for you? And if you could give advice to anyone here that is aspiring to go in the media, like what would you say to them?
Right, so first and foremost, I am very inquisitive and I like to ask a lot of questions, just like your teacher here. And I think we should, first of all, make him an honorary Channel 7 news reporter because he's asking so many questions today.
All right, thank you very much. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so we have to start with that.
All right, thank you.
And I know Mr. McGreevy said leave your books behind, but I want to, if you have to take notes, I have pens.
Would you guys like a Channel 7
so,
pen? All right, I'll hand those out.
So you can hand those out while we're talking
and
make sure everybody has
Thanks for the Channel 7 swag.
A Channel 7 pen.
All right,
and
there you go, everybody.
As we go along in this digital age, if you have any questions for me, I'm going to leave you my business card here that has my name, my Twitter account, my email, everything you could possibly want if you need to reach me. And pass those around.
I'll pop these right around.
Yep.
Okay,
and everyone can have one of those. So just as that's happening, I just want to let you know. So I actually started in TV news by working at Lowell Cable Television, similar to North Andover CAM, and what these fine employees were just talking about, just so that you know,
cool.
That's where I started at a local cable TV station and worked my way up to one of the top stations in the country. We're a top 10 market in America. And now I've been there for 25 years reporting the news, and as you can see, we cover politics, we cover sports, we cover weather, storms, snowstorms. When you guys are all home on a snow day, we're out in the middle of the storms, right in the thick of things. And basically, just to go back to the beginning, the thing about news and the thing about broadcasting, and whether it's TV news, whether it's newspapers, whether it's digital platforms, however people get their information, if you're inquisitive, if you have a lot of questions, if you like to learn a lot of things, and every day is different, that is what this profession is all about. And as you just heard, today is the New Hampshire primary. So when I leave here, I'm going up to New Hampshire, and I'll be spending the day, which is the national attention is on New Hampshire today, because they're the first in the nation that's voting today on who the next president of the United States will be. And it's a long process. But I'll be up there with the candidates, with the voters, and I'm going to be there working from 10 o'clock this morning until midnight tonight. So I have to work a 14-hour day in New Hampshire. And all eyes of America are really focused on New Hampshire today to see how they vote and what they decide. So, you know, I started out, I sat where all of you sat, and I heard a speaker just like I'm doing today, and within this group of people, inevitably, you're all different. You all have different thoughts and plans. Some of you might have interests in things right now. Some people may not have interests in things right now. But as you grow and as you learn and as you ask more questions, inevitably somebody here may become a journalist. Maybe many of you will become journalists. And you know, as you sit here today, you know, think about what questions you have. And I always say to people, and I say it today, you know, there's no silly question to ask. Any question that you're thinking about, probably someone else in this room is thinking about. So just ask the questions and learn and gather information. And I've been covering, you know, as I said, politics. We've covered the President of the United States. This is when Barack Obama came to town, and this is how he flew in on Air Force One. And what we say in journalism is we have a front row seat to history, to everything. We are right in there. We get close to everything, and we get to see people and talk to people. I've been down to the White House, being live at the White House. This is when I went down to the White House to cover stories down there in Washington. The station sends us down there, and this is what you sometimes see on TV. Now, for a lot of you, you've probably grown up with the Red Sox and the Celtics and the Bruins and the Patriots, even though they didn't have a good year this year, and winning their championships. And again, when they win, you know, we are right in there covering the trophies. We're with them on the bus, on the parades. I was in 2004 when the Red Sox won the World Series for the first time in, you know, a century. I was the only TV reporter on one of the duck boats in the Charles River with the players, with 3 million people lining the route. So it is, you know, front row seats to history, and it's exciting. I don't know how else, I don't know what other words to use. It's exciting, and today I don't know what's going to happen, if I'm going to be interviewing a candidate, if I'm not going to be, but we're just ready for whatever happens.
Excellent, excellent. And obviously, you know, you said be inquisitive, and I think that's really, really important. You know, we have a NAMS news here, we have a cable channel, but if people are interested in going into the media for a reporter like you, or writing articles, or behind the scenes, or being a producer, or any of those really, really cool things, you know, what advice do you give them? You know, they're in 8th grade, they're going on to high school next year, so obviously there's a lot more opportunity. What advice would you give some of them if they're thinking about that?
So you can sit in a classroom, or you can be home doing your homework, and you can think, why is this important? Why do I need this? Well, today, as I stand here and as I look around and see what's on the wall, I can think of when I was sitting in an 8th grade class and what I was listening to and what I was learning, and all those things, they're just all part of the growing experience, and they're all cumulative. They come together and they help you when you get into these professions, especially in journalism, where again, it's all about, you know, trying to listen to people and ask good questions and get responses from people. So everything that you're learning today, like we'll be talking about things like, you know, in our case, when we do stories, we have to be careful about things like slander, about libel, because when we talk to people, we have to give the facts, and we have to be careful about what we say, because we can hurt people. What we say, our words are powerful. And so, you know, we have to follow by, when we say slander, that's the spoken word, and libel is the written word. So when you write something about somebody, you know, you have to make sure your facts are correct, and you have to make sure that what you're writing, what you're publishing, or what we're putting on TV is 100% correct, because you can't hurt people, you can't defame people. So you have to think about that. So, you know, even today, if you're not sure what you want to do for a living as you grow up, because there are so many things you can do. Just realize that the sky's the limit in what I do, because each and every day when I get up, I have no idea what I'm going to be doing or where that day is going.
And for college, I know college is 4 years away, 5 years away for these wonderful group of kids here. Majors in college, or did you major in communications, or what are the areas in college that you could focus on that to prepare you for this?
So I majored in communications and journalism, but I also made sure that I took classes in everything, because as a general assignment reporter, which is what I do, and as a news anchor, which I've been doing for many years as well, you have to be well-versed in topics that cover everything. So you mentioned people that get into law, so we have to understand law, politics, any topic that could come up that we're sent out to cover. We need to be able to have some information on. So I remember years ago, I took communications classes, I took journalism classes, but then I literally tried to take all other classes to get the most information, so that when I was interviewing a president, as an example, when I'm interviewing a politician, when I'm interviewing a business owner, I can talk about all these topics and have interesting questions for them.
Excellent, excellent. Now we did this, we had one of my former students come in a few months ago who is an immigration lawyer, Lindsay, and we did this, and I don't know how, people weren't very comfortable. Let's see. Is anyone here, is there like a 1% chance, is there any interest, is anyone interested in going into the media or anything? Is anyone even thinking about it? Because we had very little interest, with the lawyer as well, because I don't think we really know what we want to do right now.
And that's correct, and a lot of people wouldn't know. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a good thing, to be open-minded, because to just gather all this information, and after I walk out the door, somebody here, or many people go, wow, I could do that. And by the way, as you mentioned, it's not just in front of the camera, which is what I do, it's behind the camera. It's the writers, it's the producers, there's so many things going on. And this right here has changed what we do in our business. This right here, this device that many of you probably have and communicate with, this has changed the way we cover stories, we do things. Right now, sometimes when I speak, I take a picture and I tweet it out, because I'm on X and all the social media sites. And now, today, people don't have to wait for the 6 o'clock news tonight when you get out of school to go home and sit down and watch the news at your house with your family or anything like that. It's happening here, it's happening now. In fact, just within the past few minutes that I've been here, there's probably 10 pieces of news that have happened in New Hampshire that I don't even know about. That's how fast news is changing. And so for people that are interested in this profession, it's not just those pictures that you saw of sitting at an anchor desk or being out in the middle of a snowstorm. It's sitting here, interviewing someone, using your phone, putting that out on social media. When I put things out on social media, it's the likes, it's the who's viewing it.
Yeah.
And I used to think, oh, that's just a few people. I've put things out that got 500,000 views. And that's a lot of people, a lot of eyeballs on what I'm writing. And so what you say, by the way, and what you write matters. Every word and everything. And if you write something, and sometimes people type quickly and they mistype something, that can be a big deal. That can change a story. That can have an effect on things. So you have to be careful. This stuff matters as much as being on TV every day.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm really looking forward to this question, because I know we all know what we're interested in. So Steve, you've done so many stories. You've done big stories. We can talk about the big story later, but in terms of a meaningful story or a report that you did, what's been a story that you reported that was most meaningful to you? Why did you pick it, and what impact does it have in your job today? Obviously, it's stayed with you. If you don't mind sharing that, I think it would be really interesting.
Right, so for me personally, and again, I sort of mentioned how I've covered news, sports, weather, and a little bit of everything. 10 years ago, I was running in the Boston Marathon when they had the bombing. So I was stopped 45 seconds before the finish line at the Boston Marathon bombing. So I never finished the marathon. And so not only right after that happened, I actually, after running 25.8 miles, I didn't make it to the 26.2. I was 8/10 of a mile from the finish line, I went to work, and I was in my sweaty clothes with my number, and I was covering the news story that I was running in. And then I subsequently covered the manhunt for the suspects. Right after that, the next several days, I was in Watertown when the world was, the area was shut down and a shelter-in-place lockdown when they were looking for the suspects. And then I covered all the trials of all the people that were involved with the marathon bombing. So I am the only reporter
Point A to point
in America that ran the marathon and then covered the story.
So I know that was a long time ago. How many people know about the Boston, like familiar with Steve talking about that? So obviously, Steve's running the marathon, and obviously he's involved in obviously taking us through the capture. And the capture, the manhunt at the end, just to refresh everyone's memory, and correct me if I'm wrong, was one of the suspects hiding in a boat?
Correct, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like the manhunt and finding one of the people that did this horrible thing?
Right. So one of the suspects was hiding in a boat in Watertown, and they had the police all looking for him. And I had sources, law enforcement sources, who I was communicating with by phone as this manhunt was going on all day. So I was getting information on how they were looking for this person. And then when they found the suspect in the boat and they were taking him into custody, I was communicating with a source on my phone that they found him, that they had him in custody. And I was getting this information on one phone, and I had a second phone where I was on the TV station on Channel 7, and I was reporting that they found the suspect and he was in custody, he was alive, and I was the first reporter in America to report that on national news. It was on NBC News, CNN, and Channel 7, and the president in the White House was watching the coverage, Obama, and that's how the president heard that the manhunt was over, by my reporting from my source that I was talking to on my other phone in my other ear.
So obviously that for you was personal because you had a direct connection to it, but obviously there was death. There was a lot of sadness. It was a horrible time in the United States. I can just remember having it. So you have to report out, obviously, on a lot of rough stories, very emotional, death, shootings, and things like that. How do you deal with that? Like, obviously, you have to go on to the next story, but that must be tough. Can you just let everyone know, like, how do you deal with that? People in your field, could you take us through that if you don't mind?
Sure. So, I always say to people, we cover the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it's a balance. And, the reason I brought up that particular story was because that was the most defining moment in my career, because I was running the race and then I was covering the news event, and that doesn't happen every day. And so, between those difficult and challenging stories are what you've all seen over your lifetime, which is championship sporting events, in how that really gets everybody excited. You see people wearing Patriots hoodies here. You see people, thinking about these teams. And again, this wasn't a good year for them, but, to have that, it's striking a balance. That's what this profession is about, and really all professions are. You see it in education. We see it in all professions, and it's just really, finding a way to balance those difficult and challenging stories with all the positive stories that we cover, and featuring great kids doing great things on a daily basis. So it's really trying to find that balance, and then going forward with that and making sure, we're never going to forget what happened with the marathon bombing, and we're never going to forget the victims and their families and all that. But at the same time, to show everybody that we weren't going to let the bad person win, I, along with 30,000 other people, 2 weeks after the marathon, we went back out and finished the race.
Oh, they let you symbolically
We finished the race. So we went back to Kenmore Square, the 5,000 people that didn't get to finish the race, the marathon, and we ran another 2 miles to the finish line, and we finished the race. And then the following year, we all ran the race again.
Wow.
To show people. So to your point, you can't let bad things get you down. You have to, go high and do better and persevere through challenging times.
Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. So you talked about, tweeting and going on social media and, what stories people are interested in and which ones do you get the more likes and shares and all that other kind of fun stuff in the media. So this one is, that's a pretty big story that you just talked about. Mm-hmm. President Bush was another big story. But in your opinion, what's one of the biggest stories that you've ever covered? And why do you think there were so many viewers? Like, why do you think there were so many people that were interested in it? And what did you learn? What's a big, huge story that you've covered? And tell me, why was there so much interest from the public in it?
So back to George Bush, I flew down to Texas and I interviewed him, and I had to ask him some difficult questions. And so after that interview, the story made Time Magazine, my interview with him, and it made the Washington Post with a story called License to Pry, the Media's Probe. And the article is about reporters asking, crossing the line and asking difficult questions. And so when I went to Texas to interview, he was the governor at the time, I had to ask him some tough questions that, people needed to know the answers to. So in this article right here, I'll just read to you, it says, Governor Bush got a taste of this when he, like John McCain, was interviewed on last week's special on CNN and WMUR. WMUR reporter Steve Cooper zeroed in on the governor's past. This was the question: is there any lapse in judgment in your personal life that would make you think twice about running for president? Cooper asked the governor. What about alcohol? Have you ever used drugs, marijuana, cocaine? While Bush admitted that he quit drinking years ago, I was drinking too much at times, he again declined to discuss the drugs. I'm not going to talk about what I did as a child. It's irrelevant what I did 30 years ago, Bush said. What's relevant is that I've learned from my mistakes that I've made. I do not want to send signals to anybody that what Governor Bush did 30 years ago is cool to try. Cooper said in his part of the job is to ask about not just the public issues, but other issues that some might find private issues. So when there are stories out there, whether they're true or false, I'm certainly going to ask the tough questions. It gives any candidate the opportunity to set the record straight.
So you asked Governor Bush, whose father was President of the United States,
correct,
questions about drugs and alcohol. And obviously that was a line that you crossed. So did that come from Channel 7 that wanted you to do that, or did you kind of internally take advantage of that opportunity? And obviously it sounds like he dealt, what did you think his reaction was to it in terms of how he handled it?
Well, he handled it however he wanted to handle it, and that's not my job to worry about how he handles it.
Yep.
My job and my reputation, like when I was flying down to Texas, to the state capitol to interview him, the stakes couldn't have been higher for Governor Bush, and the stakes couldn't have been higher for Steve Cooper, because everyone is looking at the governor because they're going to decide that they want him to be the president, and he can answer it however he wants. And then for me, if I, they say, if you have to ask, you can't just ask softball questions and make it, you have to sometimes go into uncomfortable areas, and that's what I talk about, asking tough questions. And there's no, you can't be, obnoxious, right, and you can't cross the line, but there's ways to ask the questions, as I just read to you there. And it obviously made national news that everyone around the country was talking about license to pry. Did I cross the line in getting into his personal life? But like I said, I'm going to ask the tough questions, and he can respond. He can say, hey, get out of my office. I don't want to talk to you. He can do whatever he wants. That's his job. But as a journalist, I have a responsibility to the people that I represent, which are the viewers.
And that's the interest.
Correct.
People wanted you to ask that
right.
question. You were thinking of your viewers.
Correct. And same thing when we used to interview, now he's the former coach of the Patriots, who really, Bill Belichick, a lot of times it was tough to get responses from him, but we had to ask him tough questions. We couldn't just say, hey, coach, so hey, another win today. Sometimes you have to say, so did Brady really deflate the balls, you know what I mean, and things like that, or whatever the subject matter was with.
So again, that is something that you have to do, and and I think what you're kind of getting at here is such an important part of your job is thinking of your viewers and what would your viewers want to know.
Correct.
Which is what you're trying to do. So great. That was excellent. That was excellent.
Yep.
Okay. So you mentioned this earlier, and the one thing that we did in the Freedom of Press unit is we talked about research, and we talked about credible sources, and we talked about all these different types of things. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this question kind of twofold: your world and the kids' world, because I want to bring all of you into this. So your world is, tell us a little bit about the process. I'm sure there's a research department, and I'm sure you do research on your own. Why do you think this is so important? And the other question is, have you personally ever accidentally had an error appear in a story, and what do you need to do in the media when that error appears? And then to kind of flip it on the kids, as I mentioned to you before the talk, they will be doing a student-led civics project starting in March, where they're going to pick an issue or a topic that they feel passionately about, and they're going to want to make change. And one of the most important parts of that process at the beginning is research. So advice to them for doing research. So if you could take the one about kind of your worlds and what you've needed to do, and then maybe flip it and give them a little bit of advice in terms of what they're going to have to do in a couple months as 8th grade civics students.
Right, so research is really the key to all this, everything that we're talking about. In fact, as I was driving over here and talking about how I was going to be in New Hampshire today, the first thing I did this morning, as I had done yesterday and the day before, is behind the scenes, not in front of the camera, I've been doing research about the New Hampshire primary. So the reason that I've been doing that research, and I've been doing it online, I've been looking things up, I've pulled up old articles. The reason that I'm doing that is because I want to know the most information I can before I get to New Hampshire today, because I don't know if I'm going to run into a candidate. I don't know if I'm going to run into Donald Trump or Nikki Haley or anybody, but the opportunity presents itself that I could. And so I want to be the most prepared that I can be. So personally, research is the whole key to everything that I'm talking about here. And the questions that I asked Governor Bush at the time, that was based on my research. That was based on my research. Nobody told me, I don't know anything about, the reason I asked him about his past is because I did research and I learned that in his younger days he had some issues with drugs and alcohol and things like that. And I wanted to know if he thought that that was going to be a problem for him becoming the president. And he can respond, he can do his own research, but just like with you, research is key. Research is the key to everything that we're talking about today, because as you look back and as you get this information, it's going to help you put your story together and your report together. And so, when you're trying to make change, you can only make change by looking things up and finding out the most information you can about the topic that you're doing. If you're trying to make social change or trying to make a difference, anything, even if it's, changing the lights at the corner there so that kids can cross the street safely. I've done stories about that. And people, they go to the police department. That's when we use sources. You go to, the principal. You go to some, a selectman and say, how many accidents did there used to be at that intersection there? And you try to, you're going to be an advocate for change, but the only way you're going to do that is by going out and getting this information. I have sources of people that trust me and know that I'm not going to give out their name, but they're going to give me information in exchange for me protecting them as a source. My credibility is on the line, so when I get information, I have to make sure that it's, we have to have, when I put out a story that I'm using sources, I don't say 7 News source, I say sources, because we have to get more, in our station, we're required to get more than one source on a story, because the stakes are so high and we don't want to have those mistakes. We don't want, because the more mistakes I have, the less credible I am to the viewers that watch Channel 7. Same thing with all of you. You want to make sure the information that you're putting out is 100% accurate, because that's how people are going to trust you, believe you, read you, make the changes that you want, and that's what's going to be the difference.
So, when the news, has an accidental error, not deliberate, what's that process? Is there a formal retraction, or does what happens? Because I think that's important. Like, what happens when, accidentally misinformation goes out there?
Right. So first of all, you try to correct it as quickly as you can, depending upon what it is, and then depending on how you got this information that it was wrong. Did that come from a person? Did they say, no, you have this wrong? And then we have to check, say, wait, how did we get this wrong? Why is this wrong? So first there's a retraction. On the news, we might have to put out a retraction, or on social media, put something out. And then beyond that, that's when I had mentioned earlier about, we're sort of guided by, in the legal world, we can't defame people. So, we can't say, so-and-so, did this, and they can then sue our station for, in that particular case, slander for what we said, or if we wrote it, for being liable. So when we put things out, for example, at our station, we have a whole series of producers, executive producers, and managers behind the scenes who are editorially looking at all this information before we hit the send button or before it airs on TV. So every time I put a story together, like tonight or last night, there's someone reading my story. There's eyes on my story before it goes to the 50,000 people that are going to watch it on Channel 7.
Excellent. So again, those are the things that we talked about in the unit in terms of, in colonial times, not having freedom of press, and then obviously that being corrected with the Bill of Rights, and now us being able to be critical of the government. But as Steve said, you're not allowed to lie and obviously threaten. Those things would not be protected. So I know that pretty much all of you, it was crystal clear in that little post assessment we did that you got that, but obviously that's a very important part of Steve's job, obviously, and Channel 7. So thank you. Okay, so this is the big three, and then this is kind of, I think this is the last thing we're going to do, and then we're going to turn it over to some of the kids, hopefully, and I have some of their questions that they wrote me anonymously from yesterday. What advice do you have for students when they consume media? And I'm just going to ask right now, I'm going to do a little poll. How, in terms of you getting your news, whether it be about sports or entertainment or just about everything, how many people in the last month have read an actual newspaper? Can I see a show of hands? How many people here, whether they're in the room with their parents or on their own, how many people have watched or been in a room where the news was on TV? Can I see a show of hands? All right. How many people have read a news story on social media? Can I see a show of hands? Okay. So obviously it looks like social media, the realities of, you talked about, X or Twitter or whatever. What advice do you have for students when they consume media? And you being in this career for a while, what problems do you see in the world of media and its consumption by the public, not just 8th graders, but adults? And then how do you see media changing in the next decade? I mean, you've seen so much change. Yep. So if you want to address any of those, that would be a great way to kind of wrap things up, Steve.
So, obviously the world has changed with technology and the way people get their news and information. And again, when I was growing up, we didn't have these. We had, these, and that's the difference. And so today, because of technology and because people have iPhones and whatever else, and now it's on their watches, and some people are saying it's going to be in your face somewhere, up
ears,
virtually, ears.
And, vision, visors.
And, there's a whole issue of AI. Everyone knows, does everyone know what AI is, by the way? Artificial intelligence. So AI is something that's behind all of this, behind these lenses and way behind what we're doing. It's going on behind the scenes right now. So first we thought this is what we have to keep up with, and now we have to keep up with AI. And one example of AI is yesterday in New Hampshire, that was my story yesterday, was somebody sent a call to voters in New Hampshire. And the call was, it was Joe Biden, the President of the United States. So when you picked up the phone and you said hello, they said, hi, this is Joe Biden. I want to encourage you not to vote tomorrow. And don't vote in the New Hampshire primary, and here's the reason why. It's Joe Biden. Well, they quickly learned what? It wasn't Joe Biden, it was AI, it was artificial intelligence. It was a fake person pretending to be Joe Biden. So they quickly had to alert people that this was going on, and that was my story yesterday about AI, about how somebody somewhere in the world, not necessarily, it can be anywhere, was sitting in a room and digitally, making the voice of the President of the United States and then sending it to everyone's phones. And people go, oh, wow, I just got a call. And then what happens is these people go, hey, Joe, the president just called me and left me a message saying don't vote. I'm not going to vote. He said don't vote. And they're like, no, that's wrong. No, that was fake. So now there's an investigation going on in New Hampshire as we speak to figure out where that happened. And the problem is, and you all understand this, is people hiding behind keyboards and phones and in secret places. We don't know where AI is. Like, somebody could be imitating me right now somewhere and putting it on the internet, or being on, taking control of my Twitter feed or any such thing. So that's the concern of where it's headed. But all I can say is when you all get your news and information from wherever you get it, because as you continue in your great, school years and high school and college, it's changing fast and furiously because of TV, because of technology. So just be aware, be a good consumer, and use the skills that you're learning here and the research. Do your research and make sure what you're getting, because when I grew up, there were 3 TV stations and 2 newspapers. That's all. There's no phone. You had your phones at your house and pay phones. But there wasn't, the news is around you. When you walk out this door in 10 minutes from now, 7 things might have happened, and you're already on to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And so, you have to sort of be a good manager of the information that you're getting.
Excellent, excellent. All right. So I have questions that I calculated yesterday on my computer in case we're going to be shy this morning, okay, and it's early. But does anyone have a question for Steve about his job, what he does, the media, stories, individuals? I do have some backup questions, but does anyone have a question that they would like to ask?
Yeah.
Yes, the first one. All we need is
Excellent.
one, Steve.
That's
Where's like the craziest place you've been to travel because of a news story?
Good question.
Yeah, excellent.
Where's the craziest place you've ever had to travel to for a story?
So a couple of things. Can I give you a couple of examples?
Yeah.
So for example, I was up in Maine a month ago for there was a mass shooting up in Maine. So we had to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and drive up to Maine, and we spent the next 48 hours in Maine covering that story. And then I had mentioned earlier about the marathon bombing, and after the bombing, we flew down to Washington, D.C., because they were having hearings in Congress about what happened in Boston. And while we were down there, they told us to get in a car and drive down to somewhere in Virginia, because one of the bombing suspects who died, one of the bad guys who died, was being buried in a cemetery down in Virginia. So we rented a car and drove down to some little town of 200 people in Virginia and drove through some side roads and found this cemetery where this guy was being buried. So we go everywhere for stories, and of course, I keep going back to obviously with the Patriots and the Celtics and the Bruins, we travel to all the Super Bowls and wherever they go. So, when I tell you every difficult or challenging story, my job is super fun. There's definitely bad stories, but we just cover fun stuff, and we get in, like I said, we have to ask the tough questions, and sometimes people don't like us asking the questions, and this is from the Boston Globe right here. I was trying to ask someone a question, and the attorney didn't like that I was putting a microphone in the person's face, and so he took a swipe at me, and that's what's in the paper.
Tried to punch you.
Tried to punch me out for asking a question. And there it is right there on the front page of the paper.
Is that the first time that's ever happened, or has that happened a couple times to you?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I said earlier, and we have to ask the tough questions and get in sometimes a little close with people. And then, same thing in the Boston Globe. There was a state trooper who was arrested for doing something, and, there I am. I wake up in the morning, and I don't want to be on the front page of the paper, but there I am trying to ask him a question, and, we sometimes become the story of the story.
So do you ever have to go, I mean, rarely, but have you ever gone internationally to cover stories?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we've gone to cover the royal family in London.
Maybe some of the Pope stuff in the Vatican
Pope stuff
City?
at the Vatican. Yeah, we covered that a long time ago when there was things going on with the Vatican, and so we really go everywhere and anywhere. And just back to the Governor Bush, after I asked him those tough questions, which was interesting because I didn't know how he would feel about that, and I didn't know how he what I didn't care what he thought of me because I had to ask the tough questions. But right after I left there, I got a couple of correspondences from him personally.
Oh, wow.
And this is from George Bush, who became the President of the United States, and he wrote, "Dear Steve, it was a pleasure to have you in Austin, Texas. Look forward to seeing you in the future. Fondly, George." Wow. And this is his signature. He wrote this, sent this to me.
Oh, that's so cool.
And, it was interesting because people can think whatever they want about what we do, but then I mentioned we have to ask the tough questions. And then I just thought it was interesting that he took the time to, and then again, another couple months later, "Dear Steve, it was good to see you in New Hampshire. I enjoyed our brief visit together. I hope to see you during our next trip to your state, George Bush."
Wow.
And that's his signature, and so basically the reason I was showing you this is because we ended up, even with my tough questions that I had to ask him, because that's my job to ask tough questions, he respected that, and he said that to me afterwards. He said, "I know you have a job to do, and I appreciate you." So I thought, wow, I'm never going to hear from this guy again. And at the time, my wife was pregnant with our twin boys, and George Bush had twin girls. And 24 hours after my kids were born, I got a phone call at the hospital in Boston. And the person answered the phone said, "Hey, the phone's for you." And I said, "Oh, at the hospital in Boston? Who is it?" They said, "It's Governor Bush." And he called the hospital and said, "Hey, how's Benjamin and Jonathan? Congratulations on the twins." So, these guys and women and everyone in the political world, I just want you to show that you can ask the tough questions. That's your job as a journalist. And you can feel good about that and know that, whether you're in the paper or whether someone's writing about you, you have a job to do. And what I take away from it is I represent the people. I represent the viewers. I represent the people that are following us on social media. So I'm going to ask the questions that you want answered. That's my job. And I'm going to do it respectfully, but I'm going to do it in a professional way.
Well, Steve, can we give Steve a round of applause? I thought this was really interesting, and I think it really made a lot of what we learned come alive. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And
and if you have any questions, like I said, you can email me
Great.
or communicate however people communicate.
Yeah.
I'm happy if like you didn't have a chance to ask a question today, but you want to know something, or someday you'd love to come in and see the station. Whatever it is. Like I said in the beginning, there's no silly question, nothing that you could ask me I haven't asked before. And so, if you go home and you talk to your parents or your brothers and sisters and they have a question or you have a question or you want to see something or understand more about what I said, contact me, because that's how I build sources. That's how I build relationships. You guys might have heard something or know something or say something, and that's how it all happens. So, do your research. My job, I'll just leave you with one thought. My job isn't a job. My job is fun. And so when you look for your profession, make sure you do something that you enjoy. Pursue that, and don't let anyone tell you you can't do anything, because you can do anything you want.
And if you ever want to do a story on the first 8th grade class to
I
ever
might.
take the grade 8 Civics MCAS practice test, you got a room full of people and sources. They can tell you what it is.
I can see that. All right.
Excellent. Thanks,
All right.
Steve.